Quick camera shots show salad, a salad dressing being stirred, ingredients, Ranger Abbey, and a series of ingredients on a table. Text reads, "A good sallading with Ranger Abbey." Ranger Abbey wears a National Park Service uniform with green pants, gray shirt, a badge, a winter hat, glasses, and a black mask.
Good morning. I'm Ranger Abbey.
Ranger Abbey stands in the Hoskins house, which is a log construction with an exposed brick fireplace in the background.
As we honor the 240th anniversary of the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, I would like to welcome you all to the Hoskins farm site.
The Hoskins farm site includes 2 log structures with stone chimneys and a large period-appropriate barn. Camera shots pan over the environment outside of the Hoskins house.
For the years prior and the generations following the American Revolution, this was a place where a colonial American family lived, worked, played, and grew. But on the morning of March 15, 1781,
artwork shows hundreds of British soldiers outside of the Hoskins house.
These grounds became the starting point for the largest battle in the Southern campaign in America's fight for independence. A key component of colonial life, as well as for soldiers surviving on campaign, was the existence of the kitchen garden.
Different crops appear in the Hoskins garden, including corn and kitchen herbs.
Here, a family grew the year-round staples that kept the household fed. Now, what exactly could be found in the garden depended on the season, as crops were rotated out based on how well they could survive in the current climate. The southern colonies would have had a few earlier growing opportunities than their northern counterparts, but the number of foodstuffs available in mid-March would still have been limited, both for colonists and soldiers struggling to survive on campaign. Long-lasting stuffs could have been kept over the winter months from the last plantings of the fall in a root cellar.
18th century sketch of different root vegetables, including onions and carrots, shows across the screen.
These goods, like potatoes, onions, some salted meats, or pickled and dried veggies, were stored for use over the months when the ground outside would have been too cold and hard to grow crops fresh.
A large cast iron pot sits in front of Ranger Abbey, along with all the ingredients needed for today's recipe. A cutting board holds a large knife with a cut radish already displayed.
Another option, which would have been particularly useful in the southern colonies as winter turned to early spring, would have been to force an early round of crops to grow in hotbeds under the protection of little mini greenhouse-like covers. Using hotbeds, the ability to provide the greens and root vegetables essential for a healthy diet could be more easily maintained. During the Southern campaign, both the British and American camps struggled to keep their armies fed. Problems with resupply and a general lack of goods meant that men on both sides were suffering from starvation and sickness. A common way to try to soften these troubles was the act of foraging.
Don Troiani watercolor painting shows British soldiers taking ham from civilians. They are loading it into a cart.
This involved scouting parties that would go out into the countryside seeking assistance from colonists in providing food, tools, horses, clothing, or anything else that the army might currently be lacking. 1781 was a hard year for this kind of practice. Goods were already scarce. The war had been taking its toll on the countryside year after year, leaving little for colonists to offer campaigning armies and even less for themselves. Unfortunately, a common side effect that accompanied these troubles was that some soldiers would disobey orders and actually loot from the colonists.
Painting shows British soldiers forcefully taking goods and holding a woman back as they seize her possessions.
Stealing goods and supplies, even from those loyal to their particular cause. As the Revolution moved towards Guilford Courthouse,
painting shows Lord Cornwallis seated on a horse leading his troops.
The Hoskins family,
a map from 1781 zooms in on Guilford Courthouse,
who had actually fled from Pennsylvania at the outbreak of the war, would have been aware of the action growing close to their doorstep once again.
Troiani painting shows American forces on a road, walking through a forest.
But even still, with the increased activity along the New Garden Road, with messengers delivering orders and militia musters taking place at the courthouse,
Troiani painting shows camping soldiers at nighttime.
The family must still have been surprised the morning of March 15th to discover that the most formidable army in the world was preparing to set up operations in their farm fields.
Troiani painting of the 71st Highlanders at Guilford Courthouse.
As a more upper middle class family, the Hoskins probably had to want for less than some of their neighbors. Their ability to also trade with the local Quaker community at New Garden would have helped to sustain the sparsely populated area of colonists.
Historical map of the Battle of Guilford Courthouse pans across the screen.
Today, as we honor the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, we will be whipping up a simple, easy, no-bake recipe.
Image of the recipe is on the screen from its original 18th century cookbook. Salad is spelled with 2 L's.
Here at the Hoskins site that can be as easily enjoyed in your modern kitchen
Images of salad on the screen. Camera zooms in.
as here in our 18th century one. A common side dish that could have accompanied an 18th century dinner or supper is what would have been referred to as a small sallading.
Camera zooms on salad that shows onions, radishes, and other greens.
Either eaten as is or dressed in salad oil, this dish of mixed greens would have been topped with available root veggies and herbs before being tossed in an optional dressing. Now for our modern palates, not being too accustomed to crunching down on plain, undressed lettuces, we will be making a light vinaigrette that can be found in the popular 18th century cookbook, The Ladies, the Housewives, and the Cookmaid's Assistant by E. Taylor.
First page of the cookbook scrolls across the screen, showing off the table of contents and the list of recipes contained therein.
Our modern adaptation comes from culinary historian Nancy Carter's book, Dining with the Washingtons. With minimal ingredients and no need of a fire, this easy, interactive recipe can be something that the whole family can enjoy together.
Camera shows different ingredients, including oil, balsamic vinegar, mustard, salt, an egg, and oil. Bowl of salad also on the table.
Here, we have set up everything that you'll need to bring this delightful little vinaigrette together. For recipes, which were called receipts in the 1700s, they were meant to serve as a basic guide, with the author under the impression that at-home cooks wouldn't need weights and measurements, for they were to be universally understood or passed down through familial generations. Likewise, our original recipe gives no measurements and simply calls for the cook to bruise and mix the ingredients together.
Ingredients are going to appear on the screen as they are named.
Our original recipe very simply calls for the yolk of a hard-boiled egg, oil, vinegar, salt, and mustard. It gives no measurements. So for help, we turn to our modern recipe by Nancy Carter. In this, she calls for the yolk of 2 hard-boiled eggs,
Camera zooms on bowl of egg yolk.
1/4 a teaspoon of salt,
Camera shows bowls of ingredients.
2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard,
Another pan shot of the ingredients.
1/4 a cup of vinegar,
Vinegar and oil are clearly shown.
and 1 cup olive oil.
Camera zooms out to show ingredients, cutting board, knife, bowl, salad, and whisk.
First, using a fork, we're going to mash our yolks.
Abby describes what she's doing on screen.
The original recipe says that you should be bruising the yolks with the end of a fork. But whichever method you choose, the idea is to just break the yolk up so that it is small enough that it can be easily incorporated with the other ingredients and not leave the dressing lumpy.
Eggs are finely mashed.
Next, we're going to add our salt.
Camera zooms in on bowl as salt is added.
And our mustard.
Ranger Abby shows mustard to the camera and then adds it to the bowl. Contents of bowl are mixed thoroughly with a fork. Side shot of Ranger Abby mixing contents in bowl. Content is now thoroughly mixed.
Now, we will add our vinegar.
Ranger Abby pours in vinegar and stirs it with the egg and mustard mixture until thoroughly combined.
And we will stir this until it's all mixed together.
Camera focuses on a side shot that continues to show the stirring process.
Lastly, using a whisk,
Ranger Abby shows whisk made out of branches.
we are going to slowly incorporate our olive oil.
Ranger Abby shows oil to the camera.
We want to add this last ingredient slowly, a little at a time,
Ranger Abby gently whisks in oil to the bowl.
making sure that we whisk it into our vinegar and egg mixture so that it really gets emulsified and creates a nice, smooth texture for our vinaigrette.
Ranger Abby continues whisking until she has a smooth, even mixture in the white porcelain bowl on the cutting board.
Now, all that's left to do is drizzle the dressing over our greens, toss, and enjoy.
Camera focuses on the salad.
We have already prepared a small sallading made with greens and root veggies that would have likely been available to the Hoskins family in mid-March 1781.
Ranger Abby arranges the salad.
In the bowl, we have lettuce, baby spinach, watercress, radishes, carrots, onion, and sage. Now, with the exception of maybe the onion, all of these ingredients would have had to have been forced to grow in hotbeds like we mentioned earlier. As we drizzle our dressing over our greens, remember, you can use as much or as little as you like.
Dressing is poured.
Any unused dressing can be stored in an airtight container in our modern refrigerators for up to 3 weeks.
Camera zooms in on salad and then shows shot of salad with dressing, then enhances after salad has been mixed with dressing.
And there you have it. A simple, fun, yummy dressing that is as nice for us to enjoy as our revolutionary counterparts. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Hoskins Farm as we honor the 240th anniversary of the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. I hope you keep checking back in over the weekend for more digital content and events commemorating our anniversary.